At 5:30 p.m., we pulled up to an intersection. A stranger in the next lane called out, "Babe, why didn't you answer my texts?" My fiancée went pale. I used to think that the worst kind of betrayal was something you saw coming, like a storm you could prepare for. But I learned that it's much worse when it blindsides you, when it happens in the middle of something as ordinary as sitting at a red light. That moment at the intersection changed everything for me, though at the time I didn't know just how far down the rabbit hole I was about to go. It was around 5:30 in the evening, the time when the city starts to clog with traffic, everyone restless to get home. I was behind the wheel, and my fiancée, Marina, sat beside me scrolling through her phone. We were on our way to meet her parents for an early dinner. The air inside the car was filled with that comfortable silence couples develop after years together. No need for constant chatter, just the sound of music humming low from the radio and the occasional turn signal clicking. We rolled up to a red light at a busy intersection. I remember the sun was dipping, casting that sharp orange glare across the windshields. On my left, a dark gray sedan eased up beside us. The driver lowered his window, leaned slightly, and with a casual familiarity that made my skin crawl, he called out, "Babe, why didn't you answer my texts?" For half a second, I thought he might be talking to someone else. But then I saw Marina's reaction. She froze. Her hand jerked, dropping her phone into her lap. Color drained from her face so quickly it was like watching life leave a photograph. She stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, refusing to look at him. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't some stranger mistaking her for someone else. Her silence screamed louder than any denial could. I glanced at her, waiting for her to say something. Anything that would make sense. She finally forced out a nervous laugh, waved her hand dismissively, and muttered something about weird people on the road. She never turned to face the guy. She just stared at the traffic light, as if willing it to change. It did, and I pressed the gas pedal, but my mind wasn't on the road anymore. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the other car's license plate, and I repeated it in my head like a mantra until I was sure I wouldn't forget it. The rest of the ride was heavy. Marina fiddled with her hair, shifted in her seat, and over-explained how some guys just think every girl they see is someone they know. Her voice cracked slightly when she said it, and I pretended to nod, but I wasn't buying it. We got to dinner, and I played the part. I smiled at her parents, joined in their stories, and passed the dishes around. But the entire time, I kept replaying that moment at the intersection. Her pale face, the man's casual tone, the way he called her babe, like it was second nature. When we got home later that night, I noticed something else. She disappeared into the bathroom with her phone almost immediately, staying longer than usual. The shower wasn't running. I could hear the faint sound of her typing quickly, then deleting, then typing again. When she finally emerged, she looked tired but oddly relieved, as though she'd just put out a fire. That was the night the switch flipped in me. I stopped being the man who took things at face value. I became someone who watched closely, collected details, and quietly measured the gaps between words and actions. Over the next few days, the small cracks started to show. First, it was her late nights at work. She'd come home an hour later than usual, claiming a meeting ran long or a project kept her tied up. That might have been believable on its own, but I noticed her car's odometer climbing faster than it should have been for her commute. She wasn't just driving to work and back. She was going somewhere else in between. Then there were the receipts. One evening, I reached into her coat pocket to hang it up and found a folded slip from a restaurant across town, a place I knew she'd never mentioned going. The date and time were printed clearly. The same night she had told me she'd been stuck at the office. The bill was for 2 entrees and a bottle of wine. I didn't say anything. I slipped the receipt into my wallet and carried on. But inside, I was cataloging every inconsistency. Her stories about work began to contradict themselves. One night, she said she was working late because her manager needed her. The next day, she casually mentioned her manager had been on vacation all week. Small things, but they stacked up quickly when you paid attention. I also noticed her appearance shifting subtly. She started dressing better for the gym, makeup, perfume, outfits that didn't look like workout clothes at all. And her gym bag, which I happened to glance into once when I moved it off the couch, had no sneakers or water bottle in it, just a scarf and a small clutch purse. One Saturday morning, she told me she was meeting a friend for brunch. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and let her go. A couple hours later, I happened to pass by the cafe she'd supposedly gone to when I ran an errand. I parked across the street and watched. She wasn't there. Her friend wasn't either. I sat for 30 minutes, pretending to read something on my phone, waiting for her. She never showed. When she got home later, she came in humming, cheerful, with a shopping bag in hand. She mentioned how great it was to catch up with her friend. She even dropped her name casually, like it was nothing. I smiled and asked what she ordered at brunch. She blinked, hesitated, then said an omelet. But the cafe I'd parked outside was a bakery, no omelets on the menu. That was when I knew I had to stop treating this as paranoia and start treating it as an investigation. The next significant clue came by accident. She'd left her car keys on the kitchen counter one evening, and I noticed a crumpled parking ticket tucked into the fold of the visor when I reached for something. I pulled it out. The date matched one of her supposed gym nights. The location, downtown, blocks away from any gym. I checked the timestamp. It was almost the same time the stranger at the intersection had tried to get her attention a week earlier. The circle was closing in, and I could feel it. That night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. The screen flashed with a message notification. The contact name was odd, something generic like Sam G. But the preview line made my chest tighten. It read, "Wish I could have seen you tonight." I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. The puzzle pieces were snapping together too cleanly. I went to bed next to her that night, pretending to sleep while my mind spun. The man at the intersection wasn't a random stranger. He wasn't mistaken. He knew her well enough to call her babe in public. He knew her well enough to be frustrated that she hadn't answered him. And Marina knew him. Her silence at that light had told me everything. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold weight of realization settle into my chest. Something was happening behind my back. Something big. And whatever it was, Marina was caught between two lives, thinking I'd never notice. But I had noticed, and I wasn't going to let it slide. When you catch someone in a lie once, you start to hear it everywhere. The tone of their voice changes, their stories come with stumbles, and little inconsistencies stick out like splinters. That was how it became with Marina after the intersection. Once my eyes were open, I couldn't unsee the cracks. The week after that parking ticket discovery, I began quietly taking stock of everything. Every excuse, every outing, every receipt she brought into the house, it all became data points. And the more I noticed, the more I realized she wasn't being clever. She was being sloppy. One night, she said she was heading to the gym after work. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and wished her a good session. She smiled too brightly, like she was proud of the performance. Hours later, she came home flushed, not with the exhaustion of exercise but with the glow of someone who'd just been drinking wine. Her bag was lighter than usual, and when she left it by the door, I took a look. No sneakers, no towel, no water bottle. Just her wallet, lipstick, and a scarf that smelled faintly of cologne, not mine. The next morning, I checked her car. It wasn't a violation of privacy, at least not to me. It was my car, one we shared. The passenger seat was adjusted in a way I never left it. Whoever had been sitting there was shorter than me. And in the small pocket of the door, there was a receipt for 2 glasses of wine and a shared dessert. The timestamp? Exactly when she was supposed to have been running on a treadmill. I didn't say a word. I folded the receipt, slipped it into my wallet, and went about my day. Marina had always been careful with her phone, but now her behavior made sense. She never left it on the counter anymore. If she did, the screen was always turned face down. She took it into the bathroom, the laundry room, even out to the trash. The more she tried to keep it away from me, the more obvious it became. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, half watching some show. She got up to grab water and left her phone behind. It lit up before she was halfway to the kitchen. A muted notification appeared, just a first name I didn't recognize, followed by, "You free tomorrow? I miss you." By the time she returned, the message was gone, locked behind her passcode. She smiled and curled up against me as if nothing had happened, and I forced myself to smile back. Inside, my stomach twisted. That was when I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. 2 nights later, Marina told me she'd be working late. She apologized in advance, said she'd probably be home after 9. I kissed her cheek and told her not to overwork herself. The second she drove away, I grabbed my jacket and followed. I kept my distance, letting a couple cars buffer between us, praying she wouldn't notice in her mirror. She drove across town, nowhere near her office. Instead, she parked outside a cafe with warm lights spilling onto the street. I parked down the block and watched. Within minutes, the same gray sedan from the intersection pulled up. The man stepped out, medium build, dark jacket, confident stride. He walked straight to her car, and Marina got out with a smile I hadn't seen in weeks. She kissed him on the cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. They walked into the cafe together, side by side. I sat there gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Watching them laugh through the window while sipping drinks, seeing her lean across the table the way she used to lean toward me. It was like watching a ghost version of our relationship, only I was locked outside, staring through glass. After about 40 minutes, they left. He draped his arm around her as if it belonged there. She didn't resist. They got into his car and drove off together, leaving hers parked outside the cafe. I followed just long enough to see where they went. A boutique hotel tucked away on a side street. I didn't need to see more. My chest burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. I drove home instead of storming in. This wasn't the time for screaming. I needed certainty, proof, leverage. The next day, Marina acted normal. She kissed me good morning, poured herself coffee, and asked if I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. She hummed in the shower. She called me love like always. I played along, but inside I was dissecting everything. That hotel wasn't near her office. That cafe wasn't a gym. And that man wasn't some stranger making a mistake at an intersection. He was a second life she was trying to keep from me. I started noticing things she didn't realize she was leaving behind. A faint mark on her neck she covered with makeup. Unexplained Uber charges on her bank statements. The sudden way she guarded her social media, deleting comments faster than I could read them. One afternoon, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced without touching it. A preview flashed on the screen. Last night was perfect. Dinner again. The name above it was saved as Sophie. No man texts like that. She thought she was clever renaming him, but she wasn't. I needed to know who he was. I couldn't live in the fog of half-knowledge anymore. I jotted down the license plate number I'd memorized weeks ago and paid a small fee online for a reverse lookup. His name came back as Jonas. I stared at it, rolling it around in my mind, feeling it settle like a stone in my gut. Jonas, the man who called her babe, the man who met her at cafes and took her to hotels. Now he had a name. The unraveling came quicker after that. On a Thursday, she said she was going to meet her cousin. I casually asked which one. She hesitated for a fraction too long before saying, Natalie. I nodded. Later that evening, I texted Natalie myself. She replied almost instantly. I haven't seen Marina in months. Why? The next morning, I brought it up lightly at breakfast. I asked how Natalie was doing, curious if Marina would trip up. She said Natalie was fine, that they'd had a long talk about work stress. I smiled, stirred my coffee, and told her that was nice. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. She didn't suspect a thing. That was when I realized just how far she was willing to go. She wasn't just juggling schedules. She was constructing entire fake outings and conversations, confident I'd never check. But the most damning mistake she made came at the end of that week. I was at home when she claimed she had a late shift. I busied myself with paperwork, trying to distract from the growing tension in my chest. My phone buzzed around 8:15. A message from her. Except it wasn't meant for me. It read, I'll wear that red dress next time. Can't stop thinking about you. I stared at it, cold creeping up my spine. A second later, another message appeared. Sorry, wrong person. But it was too late. She'd sent it to me by mistake. It wasn't just lies I suspected anymore. It was a double life I was now holding in my hands. That night, I lay awake beside her again, pretending to sleep. My mind was no longer spinning with questions. I had answers now. I knew the man's name, his car, his habits. I knew where they met, how she disguised it, and how easily her facade cracked under pressure. I wasn't dealing with suspicion anymore. I was staring at certainty. And certainty is far heavier than doubt. I'd spent weeks collecting fragments, but fragments don't change lives. They only torment you. You can sit in your living room with a dozen receipts, faint traces of perfume, and suspicious text previews, but until you put them together into something undeniable, you're just torturing yourself. That's where I was after the mistaken message she sent me. My fiancé was cheating, living a double life with another man. I knew it, but I needed more than gut feelings and scattered evidence. I needed to see it up close. I needed to know who Jonas was. The license plate lookup had given me his name. A quick search told me more. He worked in sales for a mid-sized company downtown. Single. Apartment not far from the cafe where I'd seen them. The kind of guy who traveled for work, but also had plenty of local free time. It ate at me, thinking about him living so close, walking around carefree while I was in my own home gnawing on suspicion. So one evening, I sat down, stared at his contact details, and made a decision. I would reach out. I didn't want to tip him off too quickly, so I sent a vague message first through social media. Nothing threatening, nothing aggressive. Just, we need to talk. It's about Marina. Hours passed. I half expected no reply, or something defensive. But instead, his answer came back short. Who are you? I told him my name. I told him I was her fiancé. Then I waited, watching the typing dots appear and disappear. Finally, a single line came through. What the hell are you talking about? She's not engaged. That was when I knew I had him. We arranged to meet the next day at a quiet bar. I arrived first, sat in a corner booth, and ordered water just to keep my hands busy. When he walked in, I recognized him instantly, the same man from the gray sedan. Jonas. He looked wary, scanning the place until he spotted me. I gestured him over. He slid into the seat opposite me, folding his arms across his chest. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Two men connected by the same woman, caught in a mess neither of us had asked for. You're her fiancé? he asked finally. Yes, I said. For almost 2 years now. He shook his head, almost laughed. That can't be right. She told me she was single. She told me she wasn't even looking for anything serious, just seeing where things went. I slid a photo across the table. It was one of our engagement shots, the kind Marina had insisted we frame in the living room. Jonas's eyes widened. His face drained the same way mine had at that intersection. She never told me about you, he muttered. She never told me about you. I shot back. We sat there in silence, both of us processing the same sick realization. Marina hadn't chosen one of us over the other. She had chosen both. She had built a life where we were nothing but puzzle pieces she shuffled depending on the day. Jonas pulled out his phone, scrolled quickly, and shoved it toward me. Texts. Photos. A picture of Marina in the same red dress she'd worn at a dinner with my parents. A message chain with timestamps that overlapped perfectly with the nights she'd claimed to be working late. She told me she was stuck in traffic that night, I said, pointing at one. She was with you. Jonas snorted bitterly. And the weekend, she said she was visiting her cousin? She was at my apartment. We went through them piece by piece, laying her lies out like evidence in a trial. The more we compared, the more staggering it became. She hadn't just cheated once or twice. She had been living on a rotating schedule, shifting excuses and juggling us like two halves of a single story. And then came the twist neither of us had expected. Jonas pulled up a payment receipt from a hotel. I paid for this one, he said. She told me she couldn't afford it. I frowned. She told me the exact opposite. She said she covered it because her friend needed her card for the points. We stared at each other, realization dawning. She wasn't just juggling emotions, she was juggling finances too. She was pulling money from me for groceries and rent, then turning around and using Jonas's generosity for nights out. Sometimes she even convinced us both we'd helped in different ways for the same evening. It was a web, and we were the flies stuck inside. Jonas slammed his fist against the table, drawing a glance from the bartender. He lowered his voice, but his anger was sharp. I should go to her right now and tell her I know everything. No, I said quickly. My calm surprised even me. If you do it like that, she'll twist it. She'll say you're jealous, or that I'm insecure. She's already been lying for months, Jonas. If you give her a way out, she'll take it. He leaned back, ran his hands through his hair, and swore under his breath. So what do you suggest? I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about clarity, about cutting her off from every angle. We need to catch her in her own net. No more giving her space to spin stories. We line up the facts. We confront her where she can't run. Jonas studied me, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but I want to be there when it happens. She used me just like she used you. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to relief. Not because I trusted Jonas, but because now I had proof. Real, undeniable proof that Marina was living two lives, and we could back each other up. Over the next few days, I kept my distance from Marina physically, but not mentally. I watched how she texted, how she excused herself to step outside for a call, how she grew more paranoid about her phone. She had no idea the ground beneath her was cracking. Jonas and I stayed in contact. He forwarded me screenshots of messages. I shared copies of receipts. We built a timeline, filling in every gap until it became a map of her deception. The strangest part? Seeing her life from two perspectives at once. With me, she was the doting fiancée, saving Pinterest boards for the wedding. With him, she was the carefree girlfriend, claiming she was afraid of commitment, but open to see where it went. She hadn't even kept her lies consistent. She didn't need to, because she thought neither of us would ever meet. But lies always collide. The near-public confrontation came faster than expected. Jonas had agreed not to act rashly, but one afternoon I got a message from him. She's here. At the cafe. With me. Come now. I debated it for a second, then drove straight there. I parked across the street again, watching from my car as they sat inside. Jonas leaned forward, visibly tense. Marina smiled nervously, stirring her drink too fast. Then Jonas pointed out the window, toward me. Her face shifted instantly. Eyes wide, lips parting. She turned, saw me through the glass, and went pale, just like at the intersection. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Jonas stood up, dropped some bills on the table, and walked out. He passed by my car without stopping, his expression hard. Marina sat frozen inside, unable to decide whether to chase him or come to me. She did neither. She simply sat there, staring at her untouched drink, her world beginning to collapse. That night, she tried to cover it. She said she'd bumped into an old friend unexpectedly. She downplayed everything, but the shake in her voice betrayed her. I didn't press. Not yet. Because the next shock was still coming. 2 days later, Jonas messaged me again. His words were blunt. She's not just with us. There's someone else. Attached was a screenshot. A thread of text from a third number. The tone was different, less romantic, more transactional. Compliments mixed with requests. Marina telling this third man she'd find time soon. The ground I thought had already shattered collapsed even further. She hadn't been balancing two lives. She was spinning at least three. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared into the dark and felt something inside me settle. The detective work was done. The evidence was complete. There was no doubt left, no maybe to hide behind. The only thing left was the reveal, and I knew exactly how it would happen. There's a strange calm that comes when the last piece of doubt is stripped away. I wasn't wondering anymore. I wasn't pacing or second-guessing. I was staring at the facts, plain and undeniable. Marina wasn't living a single double life. She was living multiple, and she thought she could keep the plates spinning forever. But lies don't collapse quietly. They crash like glass. I didn't want a screaming match behind closed doors where she could twist the story later. I wanted sunlight. I wanted everyone to see the truth, so she couldn't bury it. So I made plans. We had a dinner scheduled with both our families at a nice restaurant, meant to talk over final wedding details. I didn't cancel it. I told Jonas when and where it would be. I told him to bring proof. And I packed my own folder, receipts, screenshots, even the parking ticket that had set this whole chain in motion. That night, Marina got ready with extra care. She wore a new dress, did her hair in waves, and smiled at me in the mirror. I studied her reflection, and for a moment, I felt almost detached, like I was observing a stranger rehearsing a role. She had no idea her performance was about to end. At the restaurant, our families gathered around a long table. Her parents talked excitedly about floral arrangements. My mother asked about invitations. Marina sat glowing, chiming in with enthusiasm, playing the perfect fiancé. Then Jonas walked in. I'd arranged a seat for him near the end of the table. He didn't hesitate. He pulled out the chair and sat down. Marina's face drained of color instantly. Her fork slipped against her plate. "What is he doing here?" she hissed, trying to keep her voice low. I leaned back, slid the folder onto the table, and spoke calmly. "He belongs here more than you do." The table fell silent. My mother looked confused. Her father frowned. Marina stammered, trying to laugh it off, but Jonas spoke before she could weave anything. "She's been with me for months," he said, voice steady but edged with rage. "Told me she was single. Told me she loved me. I didn't know she was engaged until he reached out. He pointed at me. Until Elias told me the truth." Gasps went around the table. Marina's mother put her hand to her mouth. "That's not," Marina started, but I cut her off by sliding the first receipt across the table. Then another. Then a screenshot Jonas had printed. Then a timeline we'd pieced together. One by one, the details piled up like bricks, building a wall too high for her to climb. Every night, she claimed to be working late. Every brunch she claimed to have with friends. Every gym visit that ended in a cafe across town. It was all there, documented and undeniable. Her father picked up one receipt with shaking hands. "Marina," he said quietly, "this is dated the same night you told us you were helping with your aunt's paperwork." She looked around wildly, desperate for an escape. "It's not what it looks like. He's lying. Elias is twisting things." "Then explain this." Jonas snapped, tossing down a hotel invoice with her signature. Her words tangled in her throat. She looked at me, eyes wide, searching for mercy. I gave her none. The silence stretched, heavy as stone, until finally she broke. Her voice cracked, turning sharp. "Fine. Yes, I saw him. But it wasn't serious. She stopped, eyes darting, then shifted tactics. "It's your fault, Elias. You were always so focused on work, so obsessed with planning everything perfectly. I needed something real. I needed attention." I let out a short laugh. Not angry, just hollow. "You needed attention from multiple men at once." Her parents stared at her, horrified. My mother shook her head slowly. Jonas looked like he wanted to throw the table over. But the final blow came when Jonas pulled out his phone one last time. "She wasn't just with me and Elias," he said, showing the screen to the table. "There's another one." He handed it to her father, who squinted at the messages. The man's face darkened, then turned to his daughter with fury. "Another one?" he demanded. Marina's face collapsed. She covered it with her hands, shaking her head, but the damage was done. The dinner ended in chaos. Her mother sobbed quietly. Her father slammed his hand against the table and stormed out. My family gathered the papers, unwilling to stay another minute. Jonas left without looking back, and Marina sat in the wreckage, mascara streaking, whispering desperate excuses to ears that no longer listened. I took off the ring I'd given her, set it gently on the table in front of her, and stood. "You can keep planning the wedding if you want, but I won't be there." Then I walked away, leaving her to explain herself to silence. The consequences unraveled quickly after that. Her parents cut off the financial support they'd been giving her, furious at the humiliation. Jonas blocked her completely, refusing to answer the storm of messages she sent him. Word spread among her colleagues too, thanks to Jonas, who made sure the truth surfaced when she tried to use work hours as cover. Her employer, already suspicious of her absences, didn't take kindly to hearing she'd been sneaking off with meetings that weren't meetings at all. Within weeks, she'd lost not only her engagement, but also her stability. No fiancé, no boyfriend, no fallback. As for me, the first nights alone were strange, the house quieter than I liked. But that quiet was better than the noise of lies. I kept working, rebuilt my routines, and little by little, the weight lifted. I wasn't proud of what had happened, but I was relieved it ended before marriage tied me deeper into her deceit. The thing about lies is that they don't end neatly. They always leave scars. But scars at least remind you of the danger you survived. And when I looked back on that evening at the intersection, the man calling out, Marina going pale, I realized it hadn't been a random moment at all. It had been the universe giving me a warning, one I was glad I didn't ignore. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.